Very pleasant good morning to everyone. I want to welcome members of the press who have responded to our request to be here. We certainly appreciate it. I also want to say a very pleasant good morning to our listening audience. We are here to have a press conference of cabinet ministers. I want to apologize for the absence of the Honorable Attorney General, who is away on government duty. All the others of us are here: the Honorable Patrice Nisbet, the Honorable Richard Skerrit, our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Earl Assey-Martin, the Honorable Glenn Goss-Philip, the Honorable Nigel Carty, and myself. And we'll begin with a brief statement by the Honorable Earl Assey-Martin, our Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Marcella Liburd. Good morning to all, and welcome to today's press conference or press briefing. In January of this year, my cabinet colleagues and I announced that from that time forward, we would take it upon ourselves to address the media on a regular basis. This we felt was essential in order for you to have a full understanding of our priorities, our accomplishments, and most of all, the cohesiveness and focus with which we as a cabinet function. Today, each of my cabinet colleagues will make an opening statement, after which we will entertain questions. The briefing itself will be moderated by my colleague, the Honorable Marcella Liburd. As we all know, voters in their wisdom bestowed upon the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party 64% of the popular vote in the 2010 elections. Not only was this a clear mandate, but is a mandate that we have handled with gratitude and respect, and used to advance and protect the best interests of this nation. As a result, crime has fallen 53%. St. Kitts Nevis has gone from a fiscal deficit to a fiscal surplus. Government employees here, unlike their counterparts in other islands, have never ever had to go without pay or receive their salaries late. Major investment projects are moving forward here. Despite the world crisis, our debt to GDP, almost 200% 1 year ago, is 100% now. The lands used to reduce our debt are now owned by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis and St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank. Not a regional bank, not an international bank, but the St. Kitts Nevis Anguilla National Bank, our bank. In other words, they are still owned by the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Passenger arrivals in the Federation continue upward, and cruise passengers recently placed St. Kitts and Nevis ahead of every other regional destination, except one, in terms of traveler satisfaction. Cruise traveler spending is down regionally, but in St. Kitts, the Federation has attracted more foreign direct investment than any other CARICOM country, and we export more than any OECS country, including Barbados. This tiny country has clearly been hitting above its weight. And my cabinet colleagues and I, under the sound leadership of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, have clearly been delivering. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Douglas enjoys the support of a majority of the members of the St. Kitts Nevis Parliament. And this gives him both the practical ability as well as the constitutional and moral authority to move forward with his cabinet legislative agenda. The Honorable Marcella Liburd, the Honorable Glenn Philip, the Honorable Jason Hamilton, the Honorable Patrice Nisbet, the Honorable Nigel Carty, the Honorable Ricky Skerrit, and Prime Minister Dr. Denzil Douglas, and I hold the Constitution of our nation sacred. And with this as our guide, we move forward, confident in our status as the majority in the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis, and confident in and loyal to the government and people that we serve, and the government of which we are part of. Although our country's constitution does not impose a clear deadline by which the motion of no confidence must be heard, we are all strongly of the view that Parliament should move to debate this measure. At this time, however, my colleagues will make their opening statements as we prepare for the upcoming debate on the 2013 budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Earl Assie Martin, for that opening statement, and we will move right into our various ministers of government getting their 3 to 4 minutes in updating us in what's happening within their various ministries. And we'll begin with the Honorable Patrice Nisbet.
Good morning. Thank you very much, the Honorable Marcella Livered. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Homeland Security, Labor, Justice and Legal Affairs continues to undertake its core mandate in support of the government's policy imperatives intended to foster holistic national development with an emphasis on the empowerment of citizens, nationals of the Federation. The various departments of the ministry therefore continue to focus on implementation of specific initiatives. Labor Department. The ongoing changes in the national, regional and international community have sharpened our focus on promoting an industrial environment which will better position the Federation to address several of the challenges which may impact our socio-economic development. In that regard, the department is currently working with the International Labour Organization in collaboration with support from our tripartite constituents to finalize a comprehensive labor code for the Federation. When completed, the code would reflect more poignantly the specific issues affecting employment in an evolving national economy. The government has expressed its commitment to providing social justice for all, with an emphasis on advancing opportunities for our women folk who continue to contribute to economic development through their employment at our industrial estates. I am happy to advise that the ministry has made some progress to actualizing government's commitment to providing for such employees payment of gratuity for long and dedicated service to the enclave industries which continue, notwithstanding the current economic challenges, to provide jobs for our people and income for our national economy. We will over the coming weeks further engage all stakeholders as we bring to fruition this very important policy initiative which is consistent with government thrust to empowering the citizens of the Federation. Government recognizes that a healthy workforce is critical to increase productivity, and we have been proactive in promoting this as an important policy objective. This has resulted in the recently launched of a national workplace policy on HIV and AIDS and non-communicable diseases. Our success in this area benefited from collaboration with the ILO, the local Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Trades and Labor Union, Ministry of Health, Community Development and Social Services, Culture and Gender Affairs. The policy focuses on creating maintenance of healthy and safe work environments, devoid of stigma, discrimination, and respect for the rights and dignity of all employees, regardless of their state of health. Decisions to drive the Federation's development process must be derived from consistent, reliable data. The absence of such data has been identified as a gap, and the department has taken steps to address this. Work has been recently completed on the installation of a labor management information system designed to furnish data required by the various agencies to inform planning. The Labor Department, in acknowledging its essential role, has embarked upon a comprehensive exercise to embrace capacity of its staff to better enable them to respond to the myriad of challenges being experienced by both employees and employers. In foreign affairs, given the constant changes in the geopolitics, the interplay between such and the new trading environment, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is intent on forging a dynamic foreign policy, which is cognizant of our status as a small developing nation with highly vulnerability indices. In that regard, The ministry is currently preparing a document which will articulate the Federation's foreign policy, taking into consideration our national and regional international commitments and obligations. The intent is to ensure that citizens, nationals are aware of the issues, several of which impact our daily lives. In due course, the salient matters will be brought to the attention of the general public. Lastly, Homeland Security. Government is committed to safeguarding the safety and security of all nationals, citizens, residents, and visitors. Homeland Security is an essential component of the overall safety and security architecture of the Federation. The Ministry continues, therefore, to place tremendous emphasis on working with the security agencies to improve border security, ensuring the integrity of our travel documents and adherence to our immigration laws. Several challenges, among them ensuring the presence of an appropriate legislative and administrative framework. The requisite human and financial resources continue to limit our capacity to be more proactive. We are, however, confident that success can be achieved through deliberate planning underpinned by consistent monitoring and evaluation. In a nutshell, that's some of the things that are happening in the ministry.
Thank you, Honorable Patrice Nisbet. I hope you stayed within your time. It seemed that you went over a little bit, but we'll forgive you. We'll now move right on to the Honorable Glenn Phillip, who will have his 4 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Marcel Liebert, members of the press, members of the listening, viewing public. Good morning. First, let me say 4 minutes doesn't really give me enough time to highlight what the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Sports, Telecommunication, Information Technology, and Posts, what we're doing. But I will truncate my message a bit, and I'll move into technology. Allow me to share an update on the Education Network, or the EduNet. This particular project is especially important to the Ministry of Information Technology. First, let me say it's designed and submitted by the National NTRC as a project for funding and also the Universal Service Fund. But at the very core, the EduNet is a high-speed fiber network that connects all public secondary schools in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, allowing for access to up to 45 megs of internet connectivity. It is, the EduNet really facilitates this network, so it's important to the IT department and to the staff and students of the Federation of all the secondary schools. This wireless component of the EduNet provides seamless connectivity for the existing and future laptops and other digital devices for the accessing of various network resources, including internet, web conferencing, cloud-based collaboration, and education management tools, all in a secure and managed environment. Of major importance, really, is the web conferencing capability of the EduNet. It is this function that will allow teachers from, for example, Virtuals High School to deliver interactive classes to students maybe in the Bastia High School or even Gingerland Secondary High School. The dream of the team teaching and master teacher lesson sharing is now a reality through the power of the EduNet. And without going into further details, let me summarize by saying the launch is expected to be coordinated by the NTRC and provide insights into the ethos of the EduNet and the immediate functionality to be provided and the possible services that will support. A live demonstration of the web conferencing capability will be a vital component of the go live. And we are thinking of going live just after the Easter vacation. So when after the Easter vacation, the students of all secondary high schools in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis will have access to this internet, to the education network. Also, at this time, there's collaboration between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Technology as it regards to distributing of laptops to our teachers, all the teachers in the secondary school, or those teachers who have not received their laptops as yet. Also, we are now procuring laptops for those students who are in grade 6 at this present time, for when they matriculate to the secondary schools in September, their laptops will be awaiting them. The other thing that I would like to speak on briefly is a PEP program. To date, the PEP program has enrolled over 974 persons, and in the fields of banking, agriculture, construction, entrepreneurship, hospitality, etc. And the difference between the laptop program and the YES program is that the PEP program and the YES program is that it's more holistic approach to training of our young people. I would like to add also that a special certificate of vocational qualification is also attached to this program, so that a person who enrolled here in St. Kitts and successfully complete the PEP program can be a part of any program within the Caribbean of similar nature. I'd also like to speak about upcoming events. The Silver Jubilee Stadium, the track is completed, except for some finishes that we have to do in terms of marking some of the starting points, which will commence today. As a matter of fact, we had a slight setback simply because of some of the persons who were designated from the company, Mondo, who was supposed to be here earlier this week, but was basically snowed in. They'll be arriving in St. Kitts today, and we're working through the period to ensure that the high school championships will be completed, which will start, I think, is on Friday of this week. So basically, in a nutshell, the ministry continues to work and continues to do the work of the people, and we will continue to bring forth our message from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Glenn Phillip. And we move right into the Honorable Nigel Carty to give his input as to what's happening within his ministry.
Thank you very much, Minister Marcelo Liebert, chairperson of this morning's press conference, Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Earl Asim Martin, other cabinet colleagues, members of the press who are here, members of the listening and viewing audience. Good morning to all of you, and I really want to give you my own word of welcome to this very important press conference, which is really designed to demonstrate that this government continues to function and meet the needs of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And to say that my own observation is that so much has happened in the last month or two. Government's functioning, in my view, has improved tremendously in the last couple of months. And perhaps I should start with the new part of the ministry, which I now hold, which deals with agriculture, marine resources, cooperatives. And I think members of the public are aware that one of the first things I did on assuming responsibility for the subject of agriculture was to conduct a tour to the various installations, farms throughout the Federation, in fact, St. Kitts, to get firsthand what were the real concerns of farmers and other persons working with or connected in some way to agriculture. And one of the issues which came to the fore very quickly and very strongly was the issue of support for young farmers, small farmers, who thought that they needed support with respect to land preparation and the provision of inputs such as seeds and other kinds of things which would facilitate their farming practices. And immediately on returning to the office, we were able to put together a program of support for the small farmers. We're proud to report today that we have helped over 15 to 20 farmers, and we are appealing to other small farmers throughout the country who need the support, small farmers, mark you, who need the support with respect to land preparation and inputs such as seeds and seedlings. We'd want them to make the requisite application to the Ministry of Agriculture so that they could be supported in this way. There is also ongoing land allocation to farmers who had been on a list of persons who had been requiring or requesting land for some time. We are moving full speed ahead with respect to the allocation of land for farmers, and at the same time seeking allocation of land from the Ministry of Lands to the Ministry of Agriculture for the purpose of agriculture. That is moving ahead very nicely, and we're proud of what we have done in the recent past to facilitate the farmers. Another important activity was the putting on of the Agricultural Forum about 3 weeks ago, where we were able to sit in a forum with farmers, members of the private sector, NGOs, civil society, other business persons, and discuss the challenges facing agriculture. Of course, there was an outcry for a new public market, and the ministry has taken this on board as part of the policy going forward, and so the ministry will make the appropriate submission for the process for the commencement of the design and construction of a new public market. And we think that the people of St. Kitts deserve a space in which they can sell their fruits and vegetables, but also a place where local business people selling their little clothes and so forth can be. And I think that if you were to create a nice, clean space for people to do that kind of activity, we will see a lot more small businesses being supported in this way. Farmers spoke of the need for better linkage between tourism and agriculture, with hotels and restaurants being involved, the penetration of overseas markets for the sale of their hot peppers, their vegetables generally, and we are seeking ways and means of building upon the successes which we have had in the past with respect to the penetration of overseas market. Irrigation continues to be a problem, and so well drilling and finding other ways and means of providing water so that we can have more produce, we can have all year round production of agricultural produce in St. Kitts. Of course, there is the ongoing problem with monkeys and so forth, and we are seeking ways and means of dealing with that. In relation to education, I will be very quick here. We are looking at how we can really expand opportunities for young people to advance themselves academically. And so we have been in discussions with the University of the Virgin Islands through the CFBC, and we have now arrived at a point where we are ready to sign an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, for 25 persons on an annual basis to get scholarships and to gain entry into the University of the Virgin Islands. We are doing a similar thing with the Monroe University. They have a campus in St. Lucia and in New York. And essentially what they're saying is that if the government were to provide a sum of money for support of students, say $5,000 per student, they would match that funding. And that will, of course, facilitate the students, although they may have to get another $5,000, $10,000 from a bank during the course of their studies. But we are trying to see if we can facilitate as many people as possible who have this desire to pursue higher learning. In the recent past, I'm sure members are aware that we have had some challenges with the maintenance of the physical property of our schools. And this is right throughout the length and breadth of the island in terms of the toilet facilities in particular, because of their regular daily use by quite a number of students in our schools. We have found it a challenge to keep them in tip-top shape. But we have now gotten to the root of the problem, and we are now assembling a maintenance team. We have divided the country, the island of St. Kitts, into 3 zones, and each of those zones will have a maintenance team retained permanently to ensure that these issues do not arise continually in the future. Maybe I can say in closing that we continue to focus on TVET, technical education. We believe it's the way of the future. We believe that the Black History Month and the Black History curriculum, the Black History curriculum is an important addition to the curriculum to awake the consciousness of the students and to facilitate this moving away of our young people from a life of crime and drugs and so forth, because we believe that that is critically important. I'll stay here now. I suspect that questions will come in relation to other aspects of the ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Nigel Carty. And now we'll hear from our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Earl Asim-Martin.
Thank you very much, Honorable Marcella Liebert. The ministry in which I represent is the Ministry of Housing, Public Works, Public Utilities, and Energy. I want to start off first with the issue of energy, because energy continues to be a challenge not only for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, but globally. But that does not mean that the government and my own ministry is not taking on the challenge to see how we can look at the issue of energy and address it in a holistic way. We are strongly of the view that renewable energy is the way that the Federation would want to move in. And we would want to move in a matrix, a renewable energy matrix that involves solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, waste energy, and if possible, in the area of biofuels. We are moving over the last week or so, we have been moving quite briskly in the area of solar energy. We had the opportunity about 2 weeks ago to sign an arrangement, a joint venture arrangement between the government of the Republic of China on Taiwan and the government of St. Kitts to construct a 1 megawatt solar farm at the airport. We just this morning had the first handing over of that check to the ministry, and we expect that within 2 weeks that we'll be able to start construction. As a matter of fact, next week, Wednesday, we expect to have the groundbreaking ceremony that will really initiate the construction of that 1 megawatt solar farm. We see this as a joint venture between the government and the Republic of China, my own ministry, the Ministry of Tourism that SCASPA falls under, and also the SIDF. We are also discussing with the SCELEC, the St. Kitts Electricity Company, and also with the SIDF as a mechanism that we'll be able to roll out very shortly in terms of looking how we can bring some relief to our customers who are at this moment experiencing difficulties. And we are looking at it as a means of how we can bring renewable energy and a mixture of relief in terms for those customers out there. The SIDF and SCELEC and my own ministry, they have been in continuous discussion over the last 2 weeks, and I expect by the end of this month, we'll be able to roll out a more comprehensive program in terms of how we expect to address the issue of the cost of electricity. We would want, in that whole mix, we would see the whole transformation to some extent of how SCELEC will operate in the future in terms of its own operations, in terms of the mechanization, and the improvement in technology that will redound to the overall efficiency in the operation of SCELEC, and that in itself will redound more to those customers out there in terms of the costs of electricity. So it's a whole combination of factors that we are bringing into place to ensure that we be able to move in that direction that will redound to the customers out there who at this moment have concern. The other challenging area that we are looking at right now is the issue of water. We are over the last 3 months also been experiencing a serious drought. And this is a drought that is affecting not only St. Kitts and Nevis, but it's affecting the whole region that we are experiencing a drought. And the ministry is looking at this in a most aggressive way. It was just about 3 weeks ago that we brought a cabinet submission to address some of that problems in terms of the reactivation of 2 wells in the aquifer at the Ponds Needmust area that we feel that will produce another 500,000 gallons of water per day. Sorry, per minute? Per day. 500,000 gallons of water per day. And we're also in discussion with another company by the name of BEAD that will be involved in some deep well drilling, because what the water department has done over the last couple of years is more or less shallow drilling. And we are looking at deep well drilling. This company, BEAD, will assist us in terms of mapping out those areas that we haven't drilled before and coming up with new water. They have indicated to us that once all things being equal, they might be able to produce at least 1.5 million gallons of water per day with that arrangement. Those discussions are ongoing. We have signed a contract, and we are looking in terms of how we can move in a holistic way in addressing the issue of the water shortage. And I want to take the opportunity here to in a way, to apologize to our customers out there, because they're experiencing some difficulty, sometimes in low pressure and also sometimes in no water in some instances. So I want to take this opportunity to apologize to some of our to those customers out there. But on the other hand, I want to say that we have to, in all areas, look in terms of how we conserve water. Because, yes, we have to look in terms of our water usage, how we use it, what we are doing. Sometimes we go to wash our dishes and the pipe run for all the time till we have completed the washing of our dishes. And all these kind of things that we have to look at in terms of how we begin to address the issue of conservation. Because the issue of water is not infinite. It is not there forever. And it's a matter that we have to address in collaboration, in partnership with the water department and with our customers out there that we would want to address that particular issue. And that not only applies to the issue of water, it also applies in the area of energy also. How we begin to address how we use the issue, how we address the issue of energy, and the whole aspect of conservation of energy. The other area that we have been working on over the last couple of months is the area of resurfacing of our roads island-wide. We have done quite a lot of work in that area over the last couple of months, and we expect to continue in that particular area. So there are some areas that might feel like they have left out, but I want to say to you that we haven't left out any area. When resources becomes available, we'll be addressed in all those areas that have problems in terms of the resurfacing of roads and the construction of new roads, because we also want to look at the construction of roads in communities that basically don't have any roads, in areas that the land sales agency would have distributed land. We want to look at in terms of the installation of the infrastructure, may it be water, electricity, and roads in those areas, because we want to do all these things so we can improve the quality of life for all of our citizens. So those are, finally, I want to look at our major project within our ministry as regards to roads, and that is the Southeast Peninsula Rehabilitation. We are taking on a major project there in terms of the rehabilitation of the Southeast Peninsula. And we have been addressing it in various phases. Late last year, we looked at the Cockershell Road on the Southeast Peninsula that we have started some work that needs to continue. We have just recently started some work on the roundabout that will address some of the drainage problems. The roundabout at Marriott that will address some of the drainage problems that we have experienced there in the past. And then very shortly, we expect to start some work within the Timothy Hill region, where we know that for most of us it's a very dangerous area, and we would definitely be starting some work there early probably early next month. That involves the whole construction of a tunnel that will assist vehicular traffic and remove a lot of the fear in people's mind once they are traveling in that area. And then we'll look at the whole reconstruction, the construction of a roundabout at the Central Bank, the Kim Collins Highway, in terms of addressing the vehicular flow in that particular area. We understand the difficulties that some of our citizens do experience once traveling in that area, especially in between the hours of 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and probably on Friday afternoons, a very difficult area in which you have to travel, and we're looking in terms of addressing that very shortly also. There's also the issue of the drainage on the Pond Road, the Frigate Bay area, and that too will also be addressed as part of the whole rehabilitation of the Southeast Peninsula Road. So quite a lot of activity we expect would have started and will continue in the area of roads in St. Kitts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Honorable Lassie Martin. We now move on to the Honorable Richard Skerrit.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Deputy Prime Minister, colleagues, members of the local press, listeners and viewers, good morning. What a pleasure it is to be here. Last week, Friday, a friend of mine called me from Jamaica. He said that he was listening to a radio talk show, a breakfast show, and that there were two members of parliament from the St. Kitts and Nevis National Assembly bashing our country and bashing the Prime Minister and the government that I have the privilege to be a part of. And he wondered whether I was listening. So I said, I don't normally listen to Jamaica radio, but if you send me the link, I will listen. So I'm almost sad to tell you that I listened and heard it myself. They predicted that there will be civil unrest. They predicted that I assume it's some of my colleagues here, because I know it ain't me, will be walking away from this government shortly. And I almost didn't recognize the country that they were speaking about. My understanding is that this kind of interview has been taking place across the region in a concerted, deliberate, strategic attack on the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis, in a unfortunate and what I call a sad attempt to paint a picture of a country that somehow is in distress, a country that is headed for major instability and unrest. I want to take this opportunity, colleagues, members of the media and viewers and listeners, to reassure the people of St. Kitts and Nevis that regardless of these attempts to destabilize the country and these attempts to paint as nasty a picture as possible of St. Kitts and Nevis, that nothing could be further from the truth. I've had the privilege for the last 4 weeks to have added to my responsibility the portfolio of the Ministry of Trade, Industry, Commerce, and Consumer Affairs. And that, of course, is added to the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. I therefore have the honor and privilege to sit where you could possibly describe as the epicenter of economic awareness. And let me reassure the people of St. Kitts and Nevis that the investment climate has never been stronger, that real investment activity has never been more active. There are at least 10 major projects in the resort and residential tourism business and education tourism business that I can point to. Members of the media can do the research and find them out. But there are at least 10 projects that will result, already result in, and will result over the course of this year in the area of $1 billion EC dollars worth of investment in this country. That would not be happening if this was a country where investors were afraid to do business. That would not be happening if this was a country where the people were taken to the streets and being upset that somehow government is non-functional. I also have had the privilege, as the minister responsible for industry, to engage those areas where it is perceived that business future is more vulnerable in the area of the manufacturing sector. One day after being appointed the responsibility, I met with the chairman of the manufacturing division of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and a former president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And we discussed those areas of intervention that were necessary. Immediately, we began work, and I can say that one company that had been significantly struggling, and in fact, where layoffs had taken place over the last year, and over 100 employees had lost their jobs, that we are working actively, feverishly, and I hasten to say, successfully, to arrest the decline in the fortunes of that company. I have engaged their major client in Germany. I have engaged their major creditors. And in what will be, I believe, a historic and unprecedented partnership between the public and private sector, this company is now facing an optimistic outlook with the possibility of a turnaround and even beginning to hire additional employees in the coming months. There's another company which has been doing better, but which had been somehow stifled in its growth plans because somehow its need for additional space had not been made clear to this cabinet and certainly had not been made clear to this minister. I'm happy to say that in a very rapid and productive cabinet submission placed before cabinet last week, Monday, cabinet agreed to make available the old supply warehouse, what we call the supply office, 12,500 square feet of it, available to this particular company so that it can proceed with its expansion plans. The expansion plans which will be rolled out to the media in coming weeks after we sign another historic partnership development agreement with this manufacturer will result over the coming 5 years or so of up to an additional 500 employees being needed. The point that I want to make to this country at this point is that at this crucial time, I should say, is that whatever the politics is, whatever people's political opinions, however much they hate, however much they dislike, and however much they may feel that it is their time, it is always time for the country to move forward. And the country will only move forward if business grows, if there are more opportunities for businesses of all type, if there are more opportunities for people to find work and for people to get empowered. And that is what this government is seeking to do. And every single day that I serve this country as a minister, that is what I seek to do, regardless of what others might be telling Jamaican audiences on the radio, or St. Lucian or Antiguan or Trinidadian audiences. This is about St. Kitts and Nevis, where all is welcome and where there is opportunity for all. And people who live here know better. People who work here know better. People who live here know that the ministries that I represent and the ministries that all of us represent here and the government that is led by Dr. Denzil Douglas is a government that works hard. A government that continues to look out for empowerment of its people. And I am confident that the work we are doing will continue to bring good dividends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Richard Skerrit. It's now left to me to put in my little 4 minutes, and I want to do so very quickly by touching very briefly on about 5 projects across my ministries, and I want to begin with the New Horizon Rehabilitation Center that was recently opened over at Harris's. That center will focus on rehabilitation of our young people rather than on punishment. And that is why we are happy that the center is being opened so that we can take our juveniles and our young people out of the prison and put them in a center where we can have them successfully re-enter their families and their communities. And that is why the programs there would include not only academics, but counseling, family visits, IT, sports, and of course soft skills, among others, to have them successfully re-enter their families and the communities. Now the center, most of the staff is already in place, and staff training has already begun, but the main training will take place between the 2nd and I think the 15th of April, where overseas consultants, UE Inc., will be coming in to train the staff. As you know, because of the sensitive nature of the center, they would have to be specifically trained in these areas to do with rehabilitation. Also, there's an operational manual that they would have to know how to operate over in the center. All of this would be taught as part of the training of the staff over there. And I want to really commend and congratulate Ms. Adele Williams, who is the director, and Mrs. Naima Hazel Menon, who is the deputy director of the New Horizon Rehabilitation Center. You'd also note that this center is operating legislatively under the Juvenile Act, which was Cap 39, now Cap 4.15 of our laws. And Section 18 specifically gives the magistrate court the authority to remand or commit a juvenile who offends the law to a juvenile rehabilitation center. And also, I think it is Section 40 which says that the GG, the Governor General, may from time to time, for the purpose of this act, designate any place to be a juvenile center, and without prejudice to the foregoing provision of the premises known as Harris's home are hereby designated a juvenile rehabilitation center. So in the act, the actual Harris's home is mentioned and designated as a juvenile rehabilitation center, and even though the Governor General may from time to time, for the purpose of the act, designate any place to be a juvenile center. And so there is legislative support for the operation of the center. There are also some regulations which are already drafted and which are just being finalized. We are hoping, therefore, that the center would go into operations where we can actually have some of the persons there, I would say, by about early May. The next project I would move on to quickly would be hemodialysis unit up at the JNF hospital. This, as you know, is to address the problem of kidney failure, which comes out of diabetes and hypertension. This center, we're hoping to have this open about the middle of May. We already have the nephrologist here. The nephrologist is already at JNF. We have already have the 2 hemodialysis nurses. They are here. They have already conducted training of 30 local nurses in the area of hemodialysis. The equipment and the supplies are here. And so we're hoping that with all the little in-house matters just left to be addressed, that this center will be opened in mid-May. The next project has to do with the opening of the Old Road Health Center, the new Old Road Health Center. I'm sure Minister Philip will be glad to hear this. That the date is set already for the opening for the 18th of April. Social Security, we want to commend Social Security for funding the furniture and the equipment and the fencing of that new Old Road Health Center. It's done under the aegis of the Basic Needs Trust Fund with funds from the Caribbean Development Bank. We want to also compliment the contractor, Mr. Clinton Sillidy, a resident of Old Road. He did an excellent job in building the new center. Of course, we just want to provide for better and more comfortable health for the persons in the Old Road area and in the surrounding areas. I move on to WISE, which is Women in Small Enterprises, a project that we rolled out on International Women's Day, where 20 women, those women who sell trays and small shops and small salons, it's a stimulus to them to try to help them in their businesses. And this week, we're rolling out to another 40 or so women, and we expect next week to roll out to even more. This is a program, as I said, to help to stimulate women at the lowest end, self-employed women at the lowest end, trays and small shops and small salons, and also to give them some help in terms of advice as to how they could better manage their businesses. And finally, I want us to look at what is happening now with respect to the civil registry. This is a project, the modernization of the civil registry. It's a project that is funded by the Organization of American States, and we want to thank our resident representative, Mr. Starrett Green, for all of his assistance. This is being done between the Ministry of Health and the IT department. The system will be designed to securely and efficiently digitize the processes of the civil registry that will allow for electronic storage and retrieval of births, deaths, marriage, and adoption information in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Currently, as we speak, the technical people from overseas are here training our local people with respect to that project. It's going on as we speak. And so I'll just end here with quick mention of 5 projects across the ministry. Thank you so very much for listening, and we are now open to questions from members of the press. Over to you.
Good morning, gentlemen and lady. I don't even know where to begin. I have questions basically for everybody, but I'll start down in the corner with Minister Nisbet. Can you explain to us how the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs and the Attorney General's office is working? Because, you know, we have separated the two now. So who answers to who is in charge of what? And also, is there, who is the minister here responsible for basically national security, not national security, immigration? That's you as well. You all change so often, I have to try to keep up. The passport issue, where our new passports do not say where the person was born, it just says your nationality is Kittitian. Is there any kind of plan to change that, to have the passports redone, and is that acceptable to your ministry?
Yes, Mr. Nisbet.
Very well. Good morning. Thank you very much. Let me say first of all that the Attorney General is in fact a minister, and he is the principal legal advisor to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so he would advise the government and the various ministries and the various departments of government when they require legal advice on a particular matter. In relation to the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, that ministry is charged with the responsibility of looking after the law courts and the administration of justice, so as to ensure that department functions in an efficient manner in terms of its delivery of service to the general public and the various stakeholders who interact with the courts. It is also responsible in terms of having some oversight for the Department of the Director of Public Prosecution, who has a certain constitutional mandated function in terms of the prosecution of criminal matters. In relation to legal aid also, the Ministry of Justice deals with that department in terms of ensuring that there is access to justice. And this government, as part of its social safety net program, has provided legal aid so as to ensure that persons who are poor and indigent of a particular bracket, they can have access to justice at an affordable cost. Also, in terms of virtually no cost, I must say. In relation to the issue of law reform is also an area which falls squarely under the Ministry of Legal Affairs. And so, from that very brief and short synopsis, you will be able to see clearly the line of demarcation between the operation of both ministries. In relation to okay, well, at the end I did that. In relation to the issue of the passports, the government did look at the matter, and the government took advice in relation to the matter. And when one looks at what is internationally acceptable in terms of the information that should be contained in a travel document, what obtains in St. Kitts and Nevis at present is acceptable, and it is in line with international standards. And so we are not doing anything that is in breach of any convention or any national legislation. What has occurred is in fact something that is perfectly legal and something that is internationally acceptable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any further questions coming from?
Thank you very much. My question to cabinet ministers, it is my understanding that elected officials decides who form the government. Now, 6 of 11 elected officials have been trying to fire the cabinet since December and have not succeeded. The question here is, essentially the motion has been filed in December. It has not been heard as yet. The government has expressed confidence in winning the motion of no confidence. If you do that, then everything goes on seamlessly. If you don't, we're told that the Prime Minister has 3 days to resign and call a fresh election. With what is taking place right now, we're hearing about all these projects and the good things that are going on in the country. Are you afraid of an accusation of, in fact, practicing bad governance by not dealing with the motion of no confidence? Are you afraid, are you concerned about an accusation that you are DCHing the situation, drop covering and holding on, rather than facing the issue? What are your responses to the accusation that why all these nice things happening now, but not the motion of no confidence?
Can I respond quickly? You said the cabinet ministers, right?
You didn't say elected officials, right?
Cabinet ministers.
Anybody could answer? You're not one of those who believe that senators don't have a say, right? I know senators are not elected. Good, but so I think you have equal say. Senators have tongues. Can I speak? I have no control over this place. Good. Okay, thank you. First of all, you made a statement that elected officials form governments. Is that's how you started it?
Yeah.
So elected officials choose, not form. Choose governments. Yes, and after the governments are formed, then you select senators. Right. So are you suggesting that this government was not chosen by elected officials? No, I'm saying 6 elected officials have a majority in Parliament and want a motion of no confidence. Yeah. And they're convinced that they can win that motion of no confidence if Parliament convenes to hear that motion. Fine. Under those circumstances, you do not have the majority
of elected officials. You have a simple majority of elected and selected, and one selected was appointed after the motion of no confidence. That's the context of the
yeah, but the point is that the government was formed constitutionally, and the government is operating constitutionally, and there are some parliamentarians who are trying to unseat the government through a constitutional method, which has not yet come to the surface. And if and when it comes to the surface, obviously it will play out, and there are politicians before who have said one thing in public and done another thing in private. There are those who have signed their names to certain things and have changed their minds later. So we will see what happens. My point, though, is this, that these same people are so obsessed with this motion of no confidence that they're doing everything they can to a point of desperation to convince the world out there that somehow this government is unconstitutional and that somehow there is chaos and mayhem in this country and that somehow there is instability and poor investor confidence in this country, all of which are false. And so whatever the constitutional issue is, as long as a government is in place constitutionally, as this one is, and legally, and conducts itself appropriately, it does not in any way justify or give credibility to any attempts by anybody to destabilize and to bring the country into disrepute. And that is the point which must not be missed. So while we get on this stuck record, while we get overly obsessed and frantic and fanatic about one constitutional issue, which I have absolutely no control over, what I have some involvement in and some considerable control over is how we deliver economic services to this country and to the investors and business people who do business in this country. And I'm saying that these people, history will speak very, very poorly of them if they continue on the track of trying to undermine this economy. Thank you.
Because if I may add, yes, with the greatest respect, I think your premise is a wrong premise. That's the first thing. Elected officials do not choose governments. People choose governments, not elected. Why? It's elected officials. Because it is through the elected officials that the people determine who they want their government to be. It is through the choosing of elected officials that the people determine who they want their government to be. And we had an election in 2010, and the people chose. What has happened since, as you know, is history, but in 2010, the people chose who they wanted their government to be. So I would deeply disrespect with your original premise, which to my view, with respect, is not right. People choose governments. And also, it is the people from whom a mandate comes. A mandate does not come from elected officials, because it is the people who give the elected officials their mandate, and it's the people who can take it back. So the mandate comes from the people. So everything is based on the people, really. Okay? And as I said, in 2010, that was our last election, we had an overwhelming mandate. The Labour government had an overwhelming mandate to serve the people of this country. And as far as we are concerned, as Daniel Richard Skerrit said, we are doing it in a constitutional way. In a constitutional way. Then you said something to the effect like, why are all these things happening now? That's what I gathered from you. A lot of the things I mentioned, for example, they couldn't have started in the last 3 months or the last 5 months. A lot of them would have started quite some time in order to come to fruition now. We would not be opening a New Horizon Center that has to be built for some time now if it hadn't started some time ago. So to make the point that as though these things are happening now, even the opening of the Old Road Center, that had to be going on for some time. It didn't just come in now. The civil registry, that has been in effect for some time. So all of these things that are happening now, it isn't because, well, now, you know, they're just coming on now. It is because of the planning that we have had, so that they're coming to fruition now. And I also want to make the point that when people say, oh yes, they're doing all these things because an election is coming or whatever they say, which is probably what you're implying, who's expecting an election in 2013? Maybe you all knew a lot of things that we didn't know. But as far as we are aware, the election, so maybe you were part of the planning that we were not aware of, because as far as we know, elections were due in 2015, and so we had all of our plans for 2013 in place. But if you knew of all the other things, I mean, Mr. Backus, with respect, you know, perhaps you did, but unfortunately we didn't. So it is not a question of, you know, all these things happening now and trying to give people the impression as though this is something that's just coming up. Look at the projects that's going on. It couldn't be just something that just last minute in the last 3-4 months. You say, okay, let's do this. How would you get a New Horizon Center? How would you get an Old World Community Center? How would you get a civil registry? So with respect.
If we have a follow-up question, it is not my intention to argue with members of government.
No, we're not arguing.
I'm just going to ask the questions. I just ask the questions, and I welcome the answers.
And we respect your questions.
I'm not trying to win an argument.
And we respect your questions, Mr. Backus.
And I respect your responses as well.
Thank
but
you.
the questions have to be asked because they're asked of me.
Of course.
And I pass them on
and that's
to
why I say I respect
elected
you.
representatives.
I respect
and selected representatives.
Yes.
My question, though, is to Minister Martin, and the question of water, Minister Martin. Is there any thinking in terms of making consumers more responsible for water, as obtains in Anguilla and obtains in Bermuda, where cisterns are almost a way of life? Is there a consideration that water shortage is not going to go away anytime soon? It's been predicted for a long time. And there have been some fires as well in the hills. Can you tell us what's been happening with that? We've been seeing fire after fire after fire. Well, I can't recall any explanation as to what you assess is happening.
You could guess.
So, just those two questions, and I might leave.
Okay.
Minister Martin.
I want to first of all deal with the issue of the cisterns, because it's just yesterday I had a meeting with someone from the building board, and they were actually indicated to me that there are certain regulations, but more specifically to Frigate Bay area, that one's houses would have been constructed over in those areas, part of the regulation that I would have constructed a cistern to assist in the own conservation of water and what's not. Some of them are building the cisterns, some are not building. Some are using and some are not using. And maybe those are things that we will have to go back to and look at and to see how we can look at it in a holistic way in dealing with the issue of conservation of water. So that is something will involve some discussion. It has to be because there's a cost involved in terms of adding a cistern and doing all these other things. There's a cost factor involved. So this will have to take in place some discussion whether you want to spread that to other areas of Sinkers. That will involve some discussion in terms of costs. The issue with respect to the bushfires that we've been having, as you would appreciate that we are experiencing serious drought. And based off some of that too, might be a consequence of the drought throughout the whole region, where you have these droughts, you have fires, bushfires being a thing. And as well, you probably might have some persons who are just setting them. We don't have the evidence, but these are all possibilities that one can speak to. So we want to, if that is happening, we want to discourage persons from doing that. But we know that some of these can be caused from natural causes, you know, we're going through a drought period, and they can be caused as a consequence of that.
If I can be allowed to just speak quickly on the drought, because I remember when we had Hurricane Hugo in 1979, we had a situation where all of a sudden our citizens recognized the need to adhere to certain building standards and building codes. And all of a sudden, I believe the planning unit people at the time understood how important building inspection and policing was of the building code. That was in 1979. It was a wake-up call. I think this drought now should be a wake-up call for our citizens, in our own interests, whenever we can, to find ways to build storage capacity at our own homes
and to do better at conserving water. Water is vital for all life. That is why this government went to such great lengths to establish the national park, the Aquifer National Park, as you know, just north of the Frigate Bay Road. 400 acres, valuable land, land that could have been put to use for many other reasons. Urban expansion, business development, all kinds of reasons we could have found to put economic activity there. But the government has preserved that area because of the valuable underground water supply that's there, that is the water that is servicing the Frigate Bay and Southeast Peninsula right now, and keeping, our people with good backup water supply. As the minister said, we're going to have to drill better and we're going to have to do some other things. But basically, water is precious, and we all need to do a better job of managing water.
Thank you, Minister. Yes.
Good morning. Deputy Prime Minister, you spoke about the water issue and how serious it is. Do you know on average how many gallons of water we use each day? And is there any way of assessing how much water is wasted? Because we could drill and drill and drill, but if we continue to waste water, then it would be counterproductive as far as I'm concerned. Do you have any way of assessing just how many gallons of water we waste per day? That's for the Deputy Prime Minister, and I'll wait until you finish too.
Well, in terms of I could speak to what we consume in the Bastia Basin, because most of it we are, in terms of monitoring in the Bastia Basin, we have a better appreciation and a better hand of it in terms of the Bastia Basin. I think in the Bastia Basin, from what I've been told by the engineers, that we produce almost in the region about 4.5 million gallons of water per day that is needed on a daily basis in the Bastia Basin. And that comes from the aquifer, as the Minister Skerrit has outlined, and we also have some of it coming from the Old Road River in the Wingfield area that comes, that surface water that comes into Bastia and stored at Lagrit, and to some extent stored at Eloise in terms for distribution. So a large amount of it comes in with Bastia. In the rural areas, I must say that a lot of the problems that we are experiencing in town are not being experienced in the rural areas, from what the engineers have indicated to me. In terms, in terms of where the supply is, and maybe in terms of population, in terms of the density, we have a larger population in the Bastia Basin, and because we have a larger density, a greater density in the Bastia Basin, we have a larger usage of water in the Bastia area, so that affects our consumption. On the issue, secondly, you did mention wastage. In terms of the wastage, I cannot calculate in terms of numbers on the wastage, but what I've been told by the water engineer, that when he makes comparison in terms of what we use in comparison to other islands and the population, he appreciates that in St. Kitts we are using much, much more water than other countries with a larger population than St. Kitts. I don't know if that answered you, but when he compared to other countries, so I don't, in terms of wastage, in calculation of waste, I would be to do the calculation, but in terms of comparison from country to country, where they are using this, probably have a larger population than us, he is telling me that in some countries they are using less water than we are using here in St. Kitts. So I don't know if that answers what you're thinking of.
Somewhat. Minister Philip, were you the one who spoke about the PEP program?
Yes, I did.
Right. Now, you said that people are comparing PEP to YES. Can you...
I didn't say I was comparing. I was just giving a distinction.
Okay, so you made a distinction between YES and PEP. From what I gather, the public is comparing PEP to YES. They're saying it's basically the same thing. Can you speak to the sustainability of PEP? Because from what I'm gathering, people are concerned that after PEP would have expired, that would be the end of it. What would happen to these 974 persons who have already enrolled? What would happen to them? Yes, you spoke about certification and so on, but we are still experiencing some difficult economic times, and how would these almost 1,000 individuals be, where would they find work?
Okay, first of all, let me say that the PEP program, within its installation, was designed basically to train our persons within the community and also attach persons to different institutions within the island of St. Kitts. Now, in terms of the sustainability, what we have done is that I think the program has been funded by the SIDF program, and it's basically is intended to continue in terms of its finite ending. That is something that we have not discussed at this point in time. However, what I will say, it's a part of what the government's mandate is, to find opportunities for our younger citizens or the citizens of this country who are not being employed at this time or who are not being trained at this point in time, to be trained and have that opportunity to work or matriculate into some other occupation.
Maybe I could just provide some support to the Minister of Youth Empowerment in relation to the question on the PEP project, which is the People Empowerment Project or Program. And the question came in relation to the sustainability of the program. I would just like to make the public aware, or just to remind the public, that the government has ongoing programs of training for young people and people of all ages, but from time to time, there's a need, based upon what's happening, for there to be an upscaled effort to train people or retrain people, as the case may be. And we feel that this is such a time. You will recall that at the closure of the sugar industry, there was a need then to be able to retrain people who were coming out of the sugar industry to move into other sectors of the economy, the tourism sector, other sectors, and so on. This is a time when we are aware that the world has been, and certainly St. Kitts and Nevis has been, in an economic recession from which we are now rebounding. And that means that there was unemployment at a level that we thought needed to be addressed in a particular way, in a specific way. And so the People Empowerment Project was put on to assist our people in acquiring skills that they hadn't had, so that as the economy rebounds, they can find gainful employment. One of the challenges we have in any country, and certainly in our country, is that you have economic development taking place, yet you have people who are coming from overseas, coming from abroad, to fill positions which are opening, because sometimes our people are not well prepared to take those positions. What the government has sought to do is to prepare our people to be able to compete as people get the freedom to move throughout the region. Minister Skerritt, in his opening presentation, told you of the numerous projects which are ongoing, some of which are about to start. This will require skills and training in the hotel and tourism sector. We have a lot of construction starting now, and we believe that some of the projects which we have put under the PEP program will address these issues directly. For example, we have the WICT, which is the Women in Construction Technology. That is one component of the PEP program, so that we expect after this program, some of these people will now migrate from training into full employment in the construction sector. That is the sustainability. It's not to have 900 people under the PEP program, but to have them graduate or move from training, matriculate from training to real world employment. We have people who are getting training in agriculture. We have the women in small enterprise who are being supported now, but the training which they're getting and the financial support which they're getting are expected to make them independent small business persons. They'll be weaned off the project, but they'll be sustainable in terms of their businesses because the economy is growing, they have the requisite training, they can manage their businesses properly, and that's the way it is. So the idea is not to keep 2,000 people on the scheme all the time, but to use the project to assist people in getting off the ground, getting employment, getting into small business. Right.
If I can just say that I had a meeting with a particular manufacturer yesterday who is very excited about the possibility of taking some of these young people into his plant under a training program funded by PEP, with the anticipation that based on what he sees happening in the global marketplace for his products, that within a matter of a few months, he should be in a position to employ them full time. So one of the things about PEP that is a little bit different this time is that as the economy is rebounding, and there's a lot of evidence of that these young people have a real chance of being placed in the private sector. And of course, as you know, government has had a freeze in employment for the last 2 years under the IMF program. I have 6 of those people working in my ministry right now, and 4 of them are in the Tourism Authority, and 2 of them have already made such an impact that the Tourism Authority board is actively looking at how they can upgrade their jobs and keep them on board. So I think you will find that not every individual will find stability in the place where they are now, but certainly as more and more private sector people and more state corporations and people that have a little more flexibility to employ as the economy gets better, those people are preparing, so to speak, for jobs, for permanent jobs down the road. The people that I have spoken to are in the program. Most of them have had jobs before and had, well, I don't know about most of them, but the ones I have spoken to, several of them have had jobs before. But under the recession, the power of the recession, they lost their jobs. Some of them have part-time businesses and not doing as well as they were doing, so therefore they feel some permanent employment will give them some more stability. But I think that there is reason to be very hopeful. This is not some election ploy, contrary to what is being said, because as we said, this was happening in midterm. This project has been planned for the last 7 or 8 months in anticipation of the economic recovery.
Another question, Minister Skerritt?
Yes, sir.
And Minister Liebert?
Yes.
My favorite, 2 for today.
I hope I'm
for today.
For the relief.
Because I want to share the love, you know. But in terms of the GDP, I think Minister Martin said it's 100% of GDP. I'm wondering if someone, at the moment, the debt we're talking about, sorry, the debt to GDP ratio, 100% of GDP. I'm wondering if we can have some examples as to if what you can share with us in terms of revenue stream, in terms of staying ahead of your commitments as a government, because to some extent you run a welfare government in that a lot of things you subsidize, or you've been doing that over the years. That's one question. The other question has to do with the big ticket items that are still there: electoral reform, constitutional reform, campaign financing, freedom of information, integrity in public life. And as Minister Liebert knows, elections are going to be in 2015. I'm hoping she can tell me if these will be some of the issues for that particular election. And my final question has to do with the unemployment rate. I'm hearing about unemployment, but I was wondering whether you'd share that with us. Whether there's any effort to have a registry of some kind for the OECS, so people could be aware of the opportunities that may exist for the skills you may have that may not be here, but may be nearby, based on the free movement concept that has been articulated. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Well, on the question of debt to GDP ratio, I honestly don't have the figure, because that has been a moving bar, fortunately downwards, and it depends a lot on, as you know, in terms of how the local debt situation pans out in light of the debt for land swap. And some of the paperwork and the other things are still in place. I think that the Ministry of Finance is probably doing some final computations now, and I think, you know, the Right Honourable Prime Minister has announced that the budget will be on the 9th of April. So it won't be long before I'm sure you'll get those exact figures. I don't have those figures, unfortunately. What I can say, though, is that because of the lowering of that ratio, because of the significant improvement in the fiscal position of government, government is now less pressured in terms of its planning and is not scrambling the way we were to meet our obligations. is a very important point, Clive, because throughout the Caribbean, there's fiscal stress. You would have been following some of the regional issues as a regional man yourself. Teachers' strikes and other issues to do with payment issues. We are doing everything we can to ensure that this government can return to a point where, in a not too distant future, the government can look at the issue of payroll adjustments, etc. A lot of people, I heard a discussion on radio the other afternoon, Clive, where somebody was saying about how well ministers do. And ministers have all kinds of perks and so on. And I didn't recognize which minister they were talking about. Do you know that this cabinet has not had a pay raise for 8 years? Civil servants have had 2 pay raises since. The government has not been able to raise pay for anybody. The government, for the last 2 years, had to keep certain positions vacant that were in need of people. We could not grow the payroll in effect. I think for the first time now, for 2 years, the government is in a position to look seriously at how it can improve its capacity by bringing on the right people on board. And that is why the PEP program is so timely, because I think down the road, as we continue to perform well fiscally, the government will actually be able to hire some of these people again. But to answer your question about debt to GDP ratio, I don't have those figures. All I can tell you is that, thankfully, it has gone in the right direction.
May I have a quick follow-up, Mr. Skerritt? Sure. And I apologize for interrupting, but no problem. What would you say would be the areas of training needed to capitalize on the opportunities you described? You said about $1 billion EC dollars will be available in the economy in terms of investments. Are there any specific areas of training, perhaps, that if you're a young person or even a retired person looking for an opportunity, you should be trying to develop a particular kind of skill set? Is there anything you could speak to about that?
A lot of the training has been happening on the job already, but you know, a lot of it is in the construction trades and the technical, what we call the technical trades. The Minister of Education spoke to that, and I believe he would be better able to tell you about this. He's been doing a revitalized TVET program, specifically to look at some of those, what you would call engineering type needs. In the manufacturing sector, by the way, there is a need for people with, you know, electrical and other mechanical and so on training. And so those are the areas where I believe the Ministry of Education has been focusing on in this term.
Oh, sorry, you go on then. Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Backus, again, for the questions. Maybe I can make a remark in relation to the debt GDP ratio. And I think it's important for people to recognize that although the economy is rebounding and there are new revenue streams, there is an uptick in tourism expenditure, etc., etc. And in construction, those are 2 important revenue streams. But I think that it ought to be known that the greatest impact on the debt to GDP ratio has been not so much the change in the GDP itself, but the drastic decrease in the debt itself. So that is what has impacted. And although we are not able to determine at this stage, at least from this level, from the head table here, what is the specific figure in terms of the debt to GDP ratio, we are aware that we are around 100%, and that by the time all the necessary transactions would have been completed, we would be down to about 80% of GDP. I think the public is aware as well, or ought to be aware, that we are thinking that based upon the advice of the central bank and so on, and based upon international standards, that around 60–70% would be the ideal in terms of allowing you to be able to expend and so on, and at the same time to put yourself in a position to have a sustainable debt going forward. To address the issue of training, as Minister Skerritt said, the Ministry of Education is focusing very much on our TVET program, technical and vocational education and training. We believe that based upon how the economy is growing and developing, tourism, construction, etc., that skills are going to be critically important in creating livelihoods for our people. So we've been focusing on that. We have, in fact, started at the CFB College with the introduction of agricultural science and agricultural technology. We are beefing up our program in the hotel and tourism trades training program, hospitality training, at the center at the CFBC. But the areas we see as being prime targets for young people to train in, of course, construction technologies, the woodwork, the plumbing, electrical, etc., and so on. We also see IT as being important because a lot of the construction which is taking place, for example, down at Ross University, where just last week we had groundbreaking for the construction of 2 or 3 major buildings or complexes. These will be IT. These buildings will be outfitted with the requisite technology and so forth, and so our young people would be involved here. I was in fact very proud and delighted to see quite a number of the young people whom I taught in college, and some of whom would have gone to the CFB College down there, really manning the IT system. So this is going to be an area of high demand for the future. The automotive engineering, already we know that there's a dearth of people who are qualified in the area of maintaining the most modern vehicles. Therefore, there's a need for us to increase the number of persons who have the requisite training. A lot of the people who have come out of college in the last several years have not been able to deal with the computer systems in these modern vehicles, and so we need to move to that, and that's precisely what we're focusing on. Entrepreneurship is important. We want the young people who are trained with the requisite skills to develop, conceptualize, manage their own businesses.
Mr. Backus, to the other part of your question that dealt with electoral reform, constitutional reform, integrity, public life. No, you didn't have boundaries realignment today. Could you add that, please?
I was leaving that.
That's what
I just wanted to clarify that what I was saying is that elections are constitutionally due in 2015, so that the talk about doing all these things now because there's an impending election in 2013, the point I was making is that perhaps you and others knew of the election in 2013 because all we had was all of our projects for 2013 laid out, because for us elections were constitutionally due in 2015. I just want to clarify that. When it comes to the electoral reform and so on, and integrity in public life and all these other things, these, as you know, are part of our legislative agenda. However, in the context of what's going on, you would have to review this legislative agenda, but they're still very much high on the government's legislative agenda. And I just also want to say, because, you know, sometimes, you know, that the integrity in public life legislation, for example, this was introduced by the People's Action Movement in 1994. They had a first reading. Maybe sometimes we need to go there and do our checks or background checks. They didn't pass it. I just want to mention that. That in 1994, they had a first reading of the integrity in public life legislation in Parliament, and they didn't pass it. That's what I would say about that particular act. So it's very interesting to hear all of the comments and so on going on now, coming from those sources. If they had an opportunity to pass it, and they didn't. And they actually had a first reading in 1994. So it's very interesting. As I said to you, these are all still part of the government's legislative agenda. And as I said, I don't know if you were part of the planning, you know. So you knew things that we didn't know. I mean, ear to the ground. Ear to the ground.
Two questions. One for Minister Skerrit and then one for the elected members, not meaning to marginalize the non-elected members. Mr. Skerrit, in terms of tourism, we're seeing that the numbers for passenger arrivals are increasing, but yet we had the World Bank official, I think it's like 2 weeks ago, saying that we need to increase our stay-over visits. In light of Liat cutting back flights, and you have American Eagle about to do away with the PR run, so we'll just have direct flights from American Airlines twice a week. How are we looking at increasing stay-over visitors to assist, especially to assist our hotels. We have them basically, as we say, they've now become dormitories. I want to ask the other question right away, if possible. To the elected members, can you all say if you all support the Prime Minister's position that the motion of no confidence has been before the Parliament, well, the clerk, for 4 months now?
3.
And 3? 4 months, yeah.
January.
Well,
3.
sorry, by the time the budget is called, it will have been there 4 months. Do you all support that stance that it could be sidelined for 4 months, whereas other parliaments deal with this in days, in weeks? And how do you all intend to vote if that bill, that legislation comes to Parliament?
Mrs. Skerrit first? No, you first.
That's more exciting, man. Deal with that
That's
first.
more exciting? Okay, I don't know what my colleagues wish to say on this.
That's more exciting, man. Deal with that first. Deal with the elected members. I can't vote on that, so
if I may, the question of, you just repeat? I haven't completely forgot. I just want to put it in proper context. Support the Prime Minister's position. Phone has been sidelined and so on. But again, as you know, even use of language like sidelined and so on, it's all a question of our own personal concepts and interpretation of things. So what you might call sidelined, we might tell you that it's a matter of which is more urgent for the country. Because our position is not that the no confidence motion should not be heard, but it should not be heard before the budget. That is our position. So, and I think we stand on very good ground to say that, because there's really no time frame for the filing of a motion of no confidence, the date set forth in our laws, neither the Constitution nor the laws of Parliament. There's really no time frame for it. But convention says that you treat it, well, with urgency. But the same convention, as I said at another time, the book of what we call the Parliamentary Bible by Erskine May, when you look at the section that deals with no confidence motion, it says specifically that it should be heard with urgency. However, you also have to look at what are the urgent matters that the government has on its agenda in determining where you set it. And we are strongly of the view that there is no urgent matter more urgent to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis than the passing of the budget. And I'm sure you will recognize, for obvious reasons, you have a limited time frame within which to pass the budget. The budget has been done by a particular time frame. So that has to be done. It's not only the fact that it has to be done, but also what are the implications if that time frame comes and the budget is not passed. I've already said on several occasions that if that is not done, people will not be paid. What will happen to their lives? They have their mortgages to pay, they have their children to look after. Institutions would not be financed, be it the hospital, the social services program, whatever it is. And so we strongly believe that the no confidence motion must be heard, but the budget has more urgency. And so that is why we have set the budget before the no confidence motion. So it's not a question of sidelining it, but putting it in its proper context. And as I said, if you look at Erskine May, you would see that there, where the convention is stated, it does speak to looking at the exigencies of the government's agenda at the same time when you have a confidence motion before you. With respect to how we would vote on the no confidence motion, I think when the time comes, we would vote. Okay, and that's my humble opinion. Well, the others can speak for themselves.
Sorry, the other elected ones. That's Minister Philip. Where are you at? Can you say also how you would vote?
Well, I can take the liberty of speaking for my other colleagues. I don't think that there is a division among us in terms of how we are going to vote. I am voting for our government to be sustained. And we're speaking about budget, the budget first. Now, and I said it in a previous interview. I think that it will be unfortunate for us to declare war on the people of this country in terms of not bringing the budget first. The students in our schools, in terms of those persons who have to receive their school meals, for example, why should I'm sorry?
Take exams.
Those persons who have taken exams, why should we delay that? Funding of the hospitals, our security forces. I'm saying we are not prepared to manufacture a crisis here in St. Kitts for our people, our civil servants, our pensioners, our elderly persons, our dependents, people who are working in the civil service and have elderly persons that are their dependents or children. I think that the budget at this time is the utmost, should be the utmost focus for us at this point in time.
As I said in my own opening statement, that the budget must come before the vote of no confidence. And for all reasons articulated by my colleagues, the reasons why the budget must come before the vote of no confidence. I want to say that we're not here before voting for a vote of no confidence at this moment. We are here basically in a press conference looking at the issues that and the development and the forward movement of the country. I could assure you that when that no vote of confidence comes to the Parliament, you'll know clearly in which direction that I'm voting on.
The issue of the budget as opposed to the motion of no confidence in the government, that has been addressed adequately by Minister Liebert in her presentation this morning. I think that she would have quoted accurately from the Bible on how parliamentary procedure, on the Bible of how parliamentary procedure should be conducted. And so I really have nothing useful to add add to what she would have said. And just to say that when you look at a paragraph in the letter that was addressed to the Commonwealth, the coalition group in fact recognize that there is no express provision anywhere which stipulates when a motion of this nature should be brought before the Parliament. In relation to how I would vote, let me say that the Constitution clearly provides how one should address this issue. And the proper forum where it should be addressed is in the Parliament, in the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so when we get to the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis, on the floor there, you will be able to know clearly how one would vote on this matter at that time. You see, some of the persons are trying to remove the government outside of Parliament. It is clear from the Constitution that you can't do that, and so you will have to await the time when we get on the floor of the National Assembly in order to deal with this particular matter.
I was just saying it's interesting that the persons who say that they are voting against it are willing to stand up and sign and say they're going to vote against it, but we're being told the persons who are supposed to vote for it, we assume will vote for it, are saying wait until it gets to Parliament, then we'll say what we have to say on the matter.
Because people have written things before, as my colleague had said, They have written things before, they have signed things before, and they have changed their mind. So let us not really debate the issue here. I think what the Attorney General, what the former Attorney General said, the Minister of Justice, is saying is the right direction. Let us wait until when Parliament meets on that particular issue, and then we'll know who is voting where. Because I'm not even sure today that the persons who would have signed the name will be voting where they want to vote.
Minister Skerrit, and we unfortunately have to wrap up because we're an hour and a half. We'll give you the last question after Minister Skerrit answers. Lady Hewlett.
My favorite tourism journalist asked a question about hotels that she says have become dormitories. Was that the word you used? Well, you should probably be speaking to the hoteliers about why they chose that business model, at least some of them. But they're dormitories for visitors. Maybe not the normal visitor who comes in on a one-week tour package and spends as much money as you would like. But we have different types of visitors coming to St. Kitts. We have those who are coming to private residences, villas, condominiums, and even private homes, the diaspora especially. And they're all valuable. We have those who come to attend universities here, and they become more medium-term tourists, but they're very valuable. They spend a lot of money in the economy, the whole industry of education tourism. We have those that come on cruise ships. We have those that come on yachts, and at different levels of expenditure. And of course, we have those who come to hotels. Well, there's no doubt that those who come to hotels, the growth has not been what we would want it to be. But it is also a function of the quality of the product and the activities of the hoteliers themselves in terms of filling their rooms. During difficult times, some of them chose to fill the rooms at less cost, also with less revenue, by having some stability in terms of meeting their fixed costs, by having some of their rooms available to students, but also meeting a need in the education sector, which is, of course, valuable to the country. So I don't knock them for doing that. However, let me just say that we have been working with some hotels to do what we can to support them in their own revitalization projects. There are one or two hotels right now that are seriously advanced in their refurbishing. Even Marriott itself, because in a recession, when things are tight and it's a little more difficult to find cash flow, one tends to skimp a little bit on certain types of expenditure. And the easiest one to cut is in employment and in capital expenditure, and of course in marketing. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle, which hopefully we're beginning to climb out now. Marriott has been investing heavily over the last 6 months or so in refurbishing its product. One or two other hotels are also doing the same. As you know, Ocean Terrace Inn is owned by TDC. TDC announced late last year that they had engaged a consulting group to come in and help them to write a new business plan for OTI. And subsequently, they were contracted to implement that plan. I think it started about 4 or 5 months ago. We're working very, very much in close partnership with that group on the marketing end of it and trying to help them with arranging financing for a significant refurbishing project. But most importantly, we've been able to attract a lot of investment with future rooms. This coming winter season, Kittition Hill will open under the management of Sedona Resorts with 85 units, high-quality units that will attract a significant yield. The Park Hyatt project, the designers, the whole development team will be on island next week to finalize plans for that project, including making a presentation to some selected stakeholders as to what the project will entail, what it will do, the final designs conceptually. So there's a lot of work going on, and I think you will see as a result that the hotel sector will pick up steam going forward. But our tourism, fortunately, doesn't depend only on hotel tourism. As I mentioned, there is
a number of other sectors that relate to tourism that fortunately have all been doing reasonably well. The Liat situation is a troubling situation. Liat put back on flights that they had taken off in November. They put them back on in January as a result of some discussions. But of course, there hasn't really been a lot of marketing support. And so even those flights are back on, the flights are not full. The intra-regional travel continues to decline significantly across the region. And St. Kitts is no different. Our numbers, just in January and February alone, our numbers from Liat have fallen 11%. This is very troubling. Fortunately for us, our numbers out of North America and the UK have been heading in the opposite direction, upwards, and making up so that we still pretty much, in those 2 months at least, we're pretty much flat year to year over last year, although we had a significant increase in January. But the fall off in Liat seats, well, not seats, but loads coming into St. Kitts are very troubling.
Thank you. We'll wrap up with our final question from Ms. McCall of SKN Vibes.
A member of the opposition benches in federal parliament, he has suggested that because the budget has not yet reached parliament, that there is a breach of the Constitution. This is Mr. Hamilton. He spoke of Section 71, if I remember clearly, of the Constitution, and he said that because it has not been tabled as yet, that it is a breach of the Constitution. Can you make a pronouncement on this, please? He also said that for the budget to be tabled now, anytime after that, would also be a breach of the Constitution, because according to him, and I guess you could read the section for me as well, it indicates that I think it's 60 days after the financial year would have started, is it? No, I'm just saying what he has explained, so I'm wondering if anyone can pronounce on. I don't know if anyone heard of what he said, but.
Section 72 is very clear on that item in terms of the stipulated time constitutionally when you can go beyond with the budget, beyond that financial year. And it clearly states that you have 4 months. I'm sure Mr. Bacchus on Saturday had the opportunity to read that specific section that speaks to 4 months after the end of the financial year when you can go you cannot go beyond that 4 months, and that is clearly stipulated in the Constitution. But it's just part of all of the propaganda to create confusion in people's mind that the government is not, that this matter is not right and not being addressed and so on, and what's that, is not, we're not doing things in a constitutional way. But the Constitution is clear, and just as I had said in my opening statement, this administration would adhere to the Constitution. We have no reasons to be antivirus or to be against the Constitution. And it is clear there, but it is in people's mind as a means of create confusion and to create crisis in the country in people's mind. But there are absolutely no crisis, and maybe the Minister of Justice could read the specific item that speaks specifically Section 72 in the Constitution that speaks. No, I think you should read it. Yeah, I think it's important whether you read it, the Minister. That speaks specifically. That speaks specifically to that section. That section, so we could be all be clear. All of Mr. Bacchus did on Saturday, and I think he was clear as a lawyer, as a practicing lawyer.
Well, I can read section 71 also. It's a long section. Really. 72. I read section 72, which for the record and for all those who are experts at constitutional interpretation, there shall be such provision as may be made by Parliament, under which, if the appropriation law in respect of any financial year has not come into operation by the beginning of that financial year, the Minister for the time being responsible for finance may authorize the withdrawal of monies from the consolidated fund for the purpose of meeting expenditure necessary to carry on the services of the government until the expiration of 4 months from the beginning of that financial year or the coming into operation of the law, whichever is the earlier.
Is it possible for you to read the first part of section 71, please? Because just as everyone needs to be clear, I would like to be clear.
Section 71 for the time being says, the Minister for the time being responsible for finance shall cause to be prepared and laid before the National Assembly before or not later than 60 days after the commencement of each financial year, estimates of the revenue and expenditure of the government for that financial year. That's what it says.
All right, we want to thank all of you for accepting our request to be here this morning for this press conference. We want you to know we appreciate it very much. We respect your questions. We hope we did justice with respect to our answers. We are very happy to have this interchange with you at any time. And we want to also thank our listeners in Radioland and our viewing public and all who are here doing the operations in the room to ensure that what we say reaches a wider cross-section of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, not only here, but across the region and internationally. Again, we want to thank you, and we hope that you will continue to have a blessed day. Thank you.